Hi everyone, this is Angie Williams with the Ms. Pa Pottery Studio, and I am in the closet because we are going to learn about the slab roller today, and we are going to be making a fish platter. So we're going to learn how to carve a little bit, do some attachments on the front and the back, and we're also going to learn how to do all this with a slab roller. So I am using high water clays, and we're going to be using speckle brown, which is a cone 4 to 6, and we're going to probably get about 3 pounds of clay going. So let's take a little field trip walk down to the garage, and I will see you there. Okay, so we have made it into the garage, and this is our slab roller. It is a beast, and it saves me so much time. So for about 5 years, I got on my hands and my knees, and I had huge canvas boards that I would roll out my clay using sticks like a lot of potters do. But after 5 years, my knees were a little worn out and I was a little older, so I invested about $800 and got this slab roller. So the slab roller is fantastic because it saves so much time, but it also allows you to get the right height and thickness, of your clay. Remember back in the day when your grandparents, I don't know if you're that old or not, but my grandmother would use these types of things as kind of like a wringer to do her wash. It's the same type of thing. So what you do is you kind of roll this, to the height of your clay, which we'll do in a minute. And once this raises up like this, you put your clay in between the two canvases. So it comes with canvas, and then you can buy extra for different colors of clay. And then you put your clay in there, and you put this back over here, and you roll it out, and turns it into like the size of a pancake. So we are going to get started on that. As you can see, I brought down some of my 3 pounds of clay. So I have my 3 pounds of clay here, and I know a lot of potters need their clay, but I am not one of those potters because there's just so much clay, and it's so sometimes a little rougher on me and my hands. So what I like to do is I like to just kind of slam it down. That way, it kind of gets out a little frustration as well if you're having a frustrating day or anything like that. But clay has a memory, so that's another reason why we need to slam it down or knead it, is because after it gets into the kiln, it will warp if we just use it like this and we don't do anything with it. So we're gonna just slam it down a little bit here. And this is a little bit more leather hard than the other clay that I have usually work with, just because this was an older piece. But I like to just kind of slam it down, and also it kind of helps get out any air bubbles and that type of stuff that you might have too. And when you're also doing this, you kind of want to make sure that you are forming it into a ball a little bit, or an oval or a square, just depending upon what kind of a piece that you're making, because then it allows you to not have to reform it later. So again, this is about 3 pounds of clay. And our fish platter, it's kind of like an oval type of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this into more of a circular pattern that we have. And the slab roller, again, takes a lot of this muscle work that you've got to do with it beforehand. And I kind of also like to work on the sides of it, get out any cracks so that it's not so able to crack when we're in the slab roller part of it. So, okay, we've got that, and we are ready to put it on the slab. Okay, so we have our circular clay that we're going to use, and so you can see that this is higher than the roller itself. So again, we need to lift this up a little higher, and And then what we're going to do is we're going to put it in between the canvases, and this will hook onto that here shortly. So you want to kind of just bring it over and kind of pull on it and move your wheel and kind of pull it out, and this is kind of what you've got, just an oval. So now I want to flip it over and pull it back over and move it up a little bit, because right now it was on 4 centimeters. So I like to do every 3, so now I'm going to do a 3 centimeter one. So you just pull it through again and see what your results are. So it's a nice circle. So because we're kind of doing a circle or oval, we want to kind of just make sure that as we go along that we're kind of keeping it in the shape of the form that we're trying to use. So again, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to turn it, and again just kind of getting out some of the lines and things like that as we kind of go along. So now we're going to put it back in, flip it over. Now we're going to go up to 2 centimeters, and because we're going to do some carving, we're going to keep this a little thicker because you don't want to go through your piece. So now that took it out like that. So it's more of an oval shape, which is great. So now I'm going to flip it back over, and I want to do the oval shape again because our fish bowl is a little bit longer than that. So now I'm going to go up just a 1/2 centimeter and pull it through again with the wheel. See what we have now. Oh, okay, that's way longer than our fish platter is. So now what we want to do is we want to make it thicker. So I'm going to do it like that. And you can kind of see air bubbles as you go along as well. And if you do, I have, our needle tool to do that just in case. But right now it looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to go up another 1/2 centimeter and bring it through, pull it through, see what we have. Okay, so we have a nice piece. And that looks like it's going to be just a little bit shy of the width. So again, we're going to flip it over. And when you're flipping things over, you use the palm of your hand. You don't want to use fingertips and let it fall, because gravity will pull your piece and make it thinner. So another 1/2 centimeter, and let's see what we have now. It's like Christmas. Oh, that's perfect. So what happens is we have a nice thick piece like the one that we have upstairs, and now we're ready to go up there and finish our work. So I will see you back upstairs here shortly. Okay, so we have just come up from the kiln, and we're actually going to use this. It's a little different than the original one that I showed you, but it's similar. So we're just going to go ahead and use this one instead. So the first thing that we're going to do is clean off the board from our previous class that we had. So I'm just going to clean all that off. And again, I talked about this before, is that I just clean it off like that because it allows to just leave some sediment there that helps your clay not to stick. So we are going to then bring our slab that we had just created downstairs in the garage to right there. And our first step is to take our tool that we talked about before, which is a rib, and I love this. And again, you know me, maybe not yet, but I don't clean a lot of my stuff. So I just kind of scrape it off as I go. Just scrape it off with your fingernail if you want. You don't even have to wash it, just kind of scrape it off. So what we're going to do right now is we're just going to use the rib, and we're going to go through the piece like this, just to kind of catch any air bubbles, but we're smoothing it out as well. You want to be able to get your clay as smooth as possible so that you don't have a lot of cleaning up to do once the piece comes out of the kiln. And I see that we have just a couple of air bubbles, which is really great. So got one here. So when you're poking it through, you kind of want to poke it at an angle and then just work it through like that. And you can see if you don't want to poke it down really hard because then you make a line in it. So you just brush it really lightly like a feather, okay? And just kind of just go back and forth, making sure you don't have any other air bubbles anywhere. And again, just getting out all the lines as much as possible on your first round. Okay, so that looks good. So now what we're gonna do is you palm it. You don't squeeze it or finger it with that. You just use your palms to flip over clay. Again, because you don't want to stretch it, you want to just kind of leave it as you just created it. Stretching it will just thin it out, so we don't want to do that. So again, just take your rib tool and just lightly like a feather, kind of just go over your clay, getting out all of the canvas marks and making sure there is no air bubbles. Because again, if you have air bubbles in your piece, once it gets into the kiln, it could explode, which means it will explode on all your other pieces and then damage everything inside the kiln. So you don't want to do that, especially, you know, you've taken so much time to be so creative. And okay, so now we have that done. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work on our piece that we have here. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we have some stuff in here so it doesn't stick. So again, we could do a little bit of Pam, or we could do a little bit of cornstarch to kind of keep it in there. And so today I think my choice is just going to be a little bit of cornstarch. So just going to get a little bit here. And again, I'll just use a nice brush that I have here and just kind of go in here with it and brush it around. Now we just kind of blow it off. And here we go. Put it in your piece. You know, this has sharp edges on it and everything like that. So what we're going to do is, again, you hold it like that, and you're just going to kind of set it on your piece. So again, I use my rib tool and just kind of hold it up and then just kind of scooch it in like a mold and turn it around. And you want to just kind of hold it up as you go, because again, you don't want to stretch out your piece. So you're just, and you kind of look underneath of it. So I'm over at the tail over here. So I want to make sure that I get it right down pretty good in the groove, and just kind of look underneath of it to see where else you need to kind of go with your mold. Okay, so I'm up here on his little lips. And you also want to make sure that you're at the bottom. And I think there's a little air pocket right there. When you're at the bottom, you want to make sure that it's sitting at the bottom so that when your piece is done, it doesn't wobble. Okay, so now that what we're going to do, since we have all of that done, is we're going to cut around the piece and take off the excess, and then we can really kind of work on it, where I'm going. But I'm kind of feeling underneath, you know, where I'm going. I don't want to cut it too short right now. The other thing to do too is when you have excess clay that we're cutting off, it's a really good idea to get yourself a grocery bag, a plastic grocery bag, to keep your clay in, because that will keep it moist, so you can use these pieces for later, okay? To kind of fine tune the piece a little bit more. So we're just going to cut a little bit more. Now you can kind of look around, feel the edge now as we've taken up a lot of the clay. I'm just taking a little bit more off because I still have a lot of clay left up here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take this blade and we are going to find the edge of our mold, and we're going to kind of work around it. And actually, I think I'm going to take it off the spinner for right now. So keep your knife straight up and down. And again, it's just kind of really important that you go really slowly around this, because if you slice through by mistake, you can repair it, but you don't know that you're repairing it on the other side very well, you know. So water, so you got your water here, and we're not going to use too much of it, but I want us to just be able to fine tune the edges just a little bit, and then we're going to work on, just take your finger around and get off the sharp edges a little bit. Not too wet though. You might even want to have a paper towel, or like me, just wipe them on your clothes, because it all comes out in the wash, you know. Go down to where your mold actually is, because then you're going to just kind of like glue it with this water a little bit. So, and this just kind of defines your fish too. Makes it a little prettier, so that when you are actually working with it, you know, you're working with a really pretty piece to begin with. And just do. If you want to, you can just take your fingers and just, you know, make sure that you've defined it where you want it to define it on the platter, and make sure that it is on the bottom. Okay, so now the other thing that we want to do now is we want to see about where we want our gills, where we want our eyes and our fins and that type of stuff. So we also have a dragonfly here, and I've picked out a few different dragonflies. So we have this one, which I think is just, it's way too big probably, but that is a choice. Here's another one, and of course these are just, you know, cookie cutters you can get anywhere. So that's a pretty nice size that we can put there. And then here's a little starfish, that maybe that's a possibility that we want to put on here somewhere. Also, I found a dolphin cookie cutter, that might be a possibility. But I also found my wood piece. So my wood piece, I wouldn't want to have anything coming up, but I would just use this as an outline of that too. So it's kind of the same as my old piece that I had. And of course you can make it different with your clays as we get going on that as well. So let's just kind of keep this aside as an example as we do our piece. Hopefully you can still kind of see that a little bit. All right, so we are going to carve first. So again, we have several different carving tools that we've used in the past and in our last video. So you want to just be selective about, you know, what kind of carving tool that you want to use. And for me today, what I think I'm going to do is, and we have like this one right here, which I think is a good one. It has, you know, the rounder one and then the small one, but I think the small one would be great to kind of define his gills and that type of stuff. So, and the other thing that you could have done with this too is on the other side of this platter is this. So this would have given you texture inside your bowl, but I didn't want to do that today just because it takes a little bit more time to do something on the inside, and we're just going to do something like right here. So, okay, so let's just kind of do this gill that we have here. So we're going to kind of do this little piece of it here and figure out, like, this would be where his eye goes. So you can go ahead and just kind of, you know, make his eye with your carving tool as well. Maybe a little inside of his eye. And his whiskers. So however you want his whiskers to be done, you can just, you know, that kind of looks like a smiley face, but it's just like his little whiskers that come out. So now we're gonna do the gill part of it. So again, it's just however you decide that you want to make his gills, and then his little fins that come down around here. See, I love these carving tools because you can just make them however you want to make them. And the depth too is something that you can just, you know, decide on as well, on the depth of your carving. But you remember, you don't want to go down too far, but you want to do it far enough so that you can, you know, the glaze will rest in it and that type of stuff. But I just really love to carve. When you're carving, like I said, when we did this platter started off with the clay was not as moist as a normal clay would be because I'd used it before and I kept it in plastic, but it still needed just a little bit more moist. So this was perfect for this piece because you want to work with leather hard clay when you are doing some carving. So this actually worked out well for our particular piece today. Okay, so we have all of that. So now what we're going to do is we are going to just make our dragonfly or whatever it is that you choose to make. So I'm just going to move this over here for a minute, and this we are going to just kind of roll out on our board right here. And I love the board because it allows you just to, you know, continue on without having it stick or anything like that. So we have some pieces that we had left over from our piece, right? And I have several rolling pins, but you're going to just, you know, kind of do the same. We've already kneaded it, but you do want to, you know, roll it into another ball. Try to get out as many air pockets as you can. And we are going to just roll it a little bit. So this is going to be thin. It's not going to be really thick like our platter, but it's not going to be too thin where it's going to break off. So when you're doing your pieces, you want to at least have them as a 1/4 inch thick, because it will shrink in the kiln. Okay, so clay is just filled with molecules and moisture, and so you do want to have most of your pieces are going to be a 1/4 inch thick or so, because they will shrink up in the kiln. And again, for carving, you want it a little thicker. So this is the thickness that we're going to keep here for our dragonfly. So for my dragonfly, I am just going to lay it on there, and then with a needle tool, I'm going to just outline it real quick like this. And then I'm going to come back with a knife and cut it out. This just kind of allows me to kind of just do this really quickly. But I think that still works good. So now what we're going to do is we are going to score it. And you can have a knife if you want to have a knife. You can have a scoring tool if you want to have a scoring tool. I just usually use my knife or something, and just, you know, you just make really, it doesn't have to be pretty. You don't want to go in too far, but just a little bit like that. And then kind of figure out where you want to put it on your plate. Okay, so maybe that looks good, and just kind of mark a little bit about where your dragonfly is going to be. All right, and then just lift it up, and you're just going to, you know, score a little bit in there as well. So because this is not as moist as we normally would have with a brand new piece of clay, we want to be able to score it on both sides, and it will adhere better that way. So just for me, it's just a little bit of water. So again, I don't use slip, I just use water, but there's a lot of clay in here anyway, but it's not thick like slip would be. So, and then just lay your piece on there, you know, however you'd like it, and make sure there's no air under there. So you also want to start in the middle of your piece and work out to get any of those air bubbles out of there. Okay, and then once you do that, you know, just kind of jimmy it back and forth. Okay, so it's stuck pretty well right there, but again, you want to work your way and just make sure that it's stuck. And the other thing that you can do as well is take your brushes and get a little bit of wetness on that too, and just kind of go around there to just make sure that it's all sealed up well. And just a little bit of wetness, you know, you don't need a whole lot, but you're just kind of going around there just to make sure there's a seal in place with your brush. And then you can also use your brush to get off any of the sharp edges and kind of curve it along. So you want your piece to flow. You want your piece to not have hard edges. You want it to kind of look like it's the same piece on top of the other piece. And so just kind of helpful, and it sharpens it up, makes it look a little bit more professional, and something beautiful that you can put on your tabletops as well. Okay, so now that we have that done, The other thing that we want to do is now we want to put the fins and carve the fins and things like that. So again, you can take your tool that we were using before. You can take another carving tool as well, and you can just kind of design your piece like that. And it might be a good idea to also go a little deeper cut and around, and then just make your piece like that. And I'm gonna have mine come off the edge, but he's swimming, so I want to make sure that my my lines go with the current of the water, so to speak. So kind of want it to look somewhat natural, and do that kind of like that. And then up here, same thing. So he's going that way, so he's swimming that way, so these are going to go that way as well. They don't have to be even, but I would suggest you dig down just a little bit and make them kind of thick like that. All right. He also has a couple little things in his back end here, so, and you could have done this before you put on your dragonfly, which would have been fine as well. Okay, so now we have our fish platter. Now the only other thing that we want to do is we want to go back with our brushes and just kind of clean that out a little bit. And I love to just use angled brushes. So I have a smaller one here that I want to use to just take a little bit more water and just kind of clean up all of those lines like this. Okay, and then once you have all of those, and make sure that you don't have a lot of water, so just dip it in water and then kind of brush it aside, just that you're just using it to take out those sharp edges. And make sure you take out those sharp edges on the sides as well, because when you have this in your home, you don't want to have sharp edges there when you're picking it up and putting a party platter together or anything like that. So once you have all of that done, we're going to flip it over and do the back side and put some little legs on it. So I will see you in a few minutes. We're going to let this dry a little bit. All right, well, welcome back. Now this has dried a little bit more leather hard, and I wanted to show you a little bit more of things that I did and I usually do with all of my pieces. I like things to come to life so that they just look like that, they have three-dimension work to them. So what I did is I took a brush of, and I just went in and I just pressed down and indented and, just did some movement. So you can get movement in your pieces. Brushes are your friend. They are absolutely your friend. So I just went in and I really pressed down and went around the sides, kind of came off of the sides a little bit, and just put movement in their wings and in his tail. And then the other thing too is, after we had went through the brushes and got rid of all of these things and the little snarls and things like that, is just go through and then use your hands too and just kind of wipe off all of the, maybe you have fingerprints in yours or something like that, but you can just kind of wipe it off and just get it really, really smooth looking. Because I'm telling you, once it comes out of the kiln, you want as less work as possible to make your piece smooth. So when we come out of the kiln, we will be sanding our pieces. And I don't know that a lot of potters always do that, but I always sand my pieces because it gets off all the little bumps and the sharp edges as well. But if you do that beforehand, you have a lot less work and it's dusty, and you just want to do it beforehand. So that is what I did while we were on break and we had lunch, was to let this dry a little leather hard, put in a little bit more movement, and now we are ready to flip it over and look at the underside, see if we have any blemishes there, and to add some footing. So I also went down to the slab roller, and we had those leftover pieces, so I just went down to the slab roller, rolled out another piece, because I decided I'm going to go ahead and do the dolphin as my footing. So that's what we're going to do. And I also have it sitting in a little corn starch, because that will keep it from sticking, because it's metal, so moist clay on metal is not good. So it will stick on that a little bit so that it will not adhere to the clay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip this over. So make sure that your piece is leather hard first, because if it's not, it's gonna lose its form, and we don't wanna do that. And the other thing too is that you're gonna need to put your piece on something that's not gonna mark it up as well either, because we just made it look all nice and pretty. So you're gonna wanna find something that you can put on that's not gonna mark it all up. So I'm just gonna use a piece of material here, and I'm going to flip this over. You could also flip it onto the back of your piece, which is what I'm going to do, and put this in between here. But again, you want to kind of smooth it out so that you don't have a lot of ripples. We can always fix it on the other side too, but this is just an apron that I have, and I'm just going to put it on top of there. You can use a really big piece of foam if you have that too. So, and we're not going to press down really hard, we're just laying it on there. Okay, so now that we have that done, what I want you to do is I want you to grab another one of your brushes, or the same brush or a bigger brush, because we are going to go around the edges now on this piece, because if you can see, there's just a little faint lines and globs that are here. So we're going to smooth those out just like we smoothed out the pieces on the front end. So grab your water, grab a brush, and we're going to do this pretty quickly here. So hopefully you can see all of that. Yep. Okay. So again, and the other thing that you can do, like we did on the front, you can just get a little bit on your finger. And again, we don't want to do it too moist, because then it's just going to take longer for it to dry. So just do that along your sides. And clay is fun. I love clay. I fell in love with clay. My very first class, I was at an art festival in North Carolina, and I saw like a pottery demonstration. He was on the wheel and everything, and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to take a class. So I took a 6-week class and fell in love with it, and now I think that was in 2005, and I've been doing pottery ever since. And I didn't know that I liked pottery. I'd never taken a pottery class before. I didn't even know that I enjoyed, this type of thing. I was always very creative, making quilts, doing cross stitch and embroidery and all that kind of stuff. But I had no idea that I was going to just start a business. So I started a business, Ms. Pa Pottery, actually. I started teaching out of my house. I would teach women in wine classes, couples nights. I would have couples nights, and I would just make it really romantic, and they would come over and take a class and have wine and candles lit and a lighted deck, so they could go out and just, while their piece was drying, just go out and have just kind of romance on the porch. And then I would have pottery and pizza for kids. So it just kind of came to be a business. It wasn't even intentional. I was just doing it because I enjoyed it. And then people at work wanted me to teach them and their kids, and it just grew from there. So here I am 16 years later, and now I've started this YouTube channel. So thank you for joining me. I hope you will like and subscribe as we continue on with different classes. Okay, so there we have it. That's all nice and pretty now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this here and here, or maybe here and here, because I don't want the plate to be tipsy-turvy. So I'm going to cut out a couple pieces. And with this, it's super easy because it's already formed. And I made this a little thicker, as you can see, because it's going to be the base. So you want to be able to sustain the weight of your piece. So always kind of keep that in mind when you're making a big piece or a small piece. The sustainability of the weight of your piece has to be on a pedestal that will support it, right? So, so I went ahead and I did that. So we're just gonna cut through this real quick, do a couple little pieces, and poke it out. And it's almost had a little bit, not enough cornstarch in it, so I might need to poke the tail out a little bit more. I'll use a brush to do that. Poke it out. There we go. And then we'll put this back in here. And the other thing too is what you want to do is, of course, you want to go through and make sure that there's no sharp edges on your bottom piece as well. Go ahead and do this up here to get those sharp edges off. And my thumbprint. Okay, so now let's go ahead and we're going to score it. Now this piece here is not leather hard because I had it in the bag. So this piece is a little bit more leather hard. And the one thing you do want to be careful about is you don't want to have a piece that's super leather hard and the other one is not, because then you have different drying things, and sometimes that just doesn't work right when one's more dry than the other. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. Again, use your handy dandy brush to kind of mold it into place. And the other thing that you want to do too is make sure, kind of look around and make sure that there's no space in between both of the clays. So like on the tail right there's space. And okay, and then your brush is dry now, right? Because you have enough liquid there that you just want to use your dry brush and soak up that liquid. And it gives you a little bit more of a visual as well to make sure that it's stuck on there. So like I need a little bit more stickiness there. And then the other thing that we're going to do before we finish this is we are going to just take one of our tools and go around the sides. The other thing, which is a good idea to do, is to take one of your carving tools and just go around the sides of it and kind of press down from the top to the bottom. So from the top of your dolphin to the bottom of your bowl, and that affixes it as well too, so that you know for sure it's not going to pop off on the kiln. So that's just an extra good measure, you know. You take your brush again and you just clean it up a little bit. I really want to get this tail done, because if the tail pops up, your whole thing is not going to sit properly, you know, or any other piece of it, but the tail looks to be more problemsome than the rest of it. So just make sure you've got it all, and then take your brush and just go around it again real smoothly, smoothing it all out so that you don't have any lines anywhere. The other thing to keep in mind too is when you're creating pieces is don't forget you're gonna have to glaze it. So glazing is a whole nother animal and it takes a while. So if you have a lot of varieties of textures or things in your piece, you're gonna remember you gotta glaze all of that too. So think about glazing when you are making your piece, because you don't want to make it so terrible that it's gonna take you days to glaze. So after you do that, then just make your piece nice and smooth. You can smooth it out like I am with my finger, and it's that side is done. So then what you want to do is you just want to come back over here and move your piece, and you want to put it down just for a second on that, just to make sure it's sitting properly and it's sitting nice and good and straight, and then pick it back up and put it back on your plate. If you have any incidents that have happened because you had it turned over, you know, you'll still have time to get those ironed out, you know, as well. And this didn't have any incidents or anything like that, so I'm just gonna put it back on the plate and finish up my other one. And there we are. So appreciate you guys coming to our Ms. Pa Pottery page and our channel, and I hope you like it. Subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you back again here in a couple more days. Thanks so much. Have a great day.